Today we are going to cover the goals of this module and an overview of crisis survival skills themselves. This will include knowing a crisis when you see one. The goals of distress tolerance skills are to survive crisis situations without making them worse, to accept reality as it is in this moment, and to become free. The skills in this module are ways of surviving and doing well in crisis situations without resorting to behaviors that will make the situation worse than it is. They are needed when you can't immediately change your situation for the better, or when you can't sort out your emotions well enough to know what changes you want or how to make them. Acceptance of reality, of life as it is in this moment, is the only way out of hell. It is the way to turn suffering that cannot be tolerated into pain that can be tolerated. You can think of it as follows. Pain plus non-acceptance equals suffering and being stuck. Pain plus acceptance equals ordinary pain, which sometimes can be extremely intense, but still ordinary pain and the possibility of moving forward. Life is not all crisis. Living life as if it is always a crisis perpetuates the experience of crisis. It interferes with problem solving that will resolve problems over the long term. Thus, it can actually backfire and create more crisis. At some point, you'll have to experience and accept the life that you have in front of you, so to speak. This is ultimately the only way to build a life worth living. You are truly free when you can be at peace and content with yourself and your life, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. In many ways, freedom is an outcome of mastering both crisis survival and radical acceptance. The crisis survival skills are the bulwark keeping you from giving into cravings on the way to freedom. Radical acceptance skills produce the quieting of intense desire. When you are free, you can look in the face of your cravings and desires and say, I don't have to satisfy you. Your intense emotions become like a passing tempest in the sea, instead of demands for action you must give into. The goal of crisis survival is to get through a crisis without making things worse. Crisis situations are short-term. These are not skills to be used all the time or as some sort of lifestyle. Crisis survival skills are skills for tolerating and surviving a crisis situation. These skills are for use when a crisis cannot be avoided. The basic idea is to get through crisis situations without making them worse. There are 6 categories of crisis survival strategies. Each is a series of methods for short-circuiting or coping with overwhelming negative emotions and almost intolerable situations. They include the stop skill for stopping yourself from engaging in impulsive behavior, pros and cons, tip skills for changing your body chemistry, distracting, self-soothing, and improving the moment. Each of these 6 skills will have an entire lesson dedicated to it in this module. Crisis survival skills are not a cure for all problems in life. Their beneficial effects may only be temporary. Achieving them is not a small feat. These skills are primarily ways to survive painful emotions. They are not designed to be emotion regulation strategies, although they may help you to regulate emotions and to reduce stress. The central goal of crisis survival skills is to enable you to survive a crisis without making things worse. Crisis survival skills are for crisis situations which are, by definition, short-term. Skills are not to be used all of the time. Overusing them can get in the way of problem solving and of building a life worth living. Crises are highly stressful situations with potential for very negative outcomes. You're very stressed about money and are having trouble paying your rent. You receive an eviction notice. A friend who likes to binge drink calls you on the phone and asks if you want to go out that night. Binge drinking in such a situation is likely to make things worse. Crises are short-term. Crisis survival skills are designed to be used only in the short term. When they are overused, as in everyday painful situations or in avoiding every unwanted emotion, problems will never be resolved. When this happens, crisis survival skills can amount to avoidance of building a life worth living and can make things worse rather than better in the long term. You may get the urge to attack another person. If you distract yourself from the urge by playing loud music or going to a movie or scrolling on Instagram or some other form of distraction, it might work here. But if every time a difficult to solve problem comes along, you avoid or distract from it, problems will remain unsolved and life is unlikely to improve. I have my clients make lists of distractions, pleasurable activities, things they can do to self-soothe, and ways to practice self-care when they are in a neutral state. I encourage them to choose from these lists as a means to take care of themselves or to give themselves time and to give themselves space so that they can come back with their emotions clear. When I present the idea of distracting, I say, a distraction is something that helps you shift your focus to something else. In order for it to be long-term effective, the promise has to be that you will return to the previous difficult situation when you feel better. Crisis creates intense pressure for quick resolution. Most crises fall into two broad categories. The first, you have a strong urge to engage in a destructive behavior. This might be taking drugs, impulsively quitting a job, hitting someone in anger. In these situations, acting on the strong urge would be ineffective. The other category would be you facing a major demand that will have serious consequences if it goes unmet. Paying your bills or credit cards might be an example. If you feel completely overwhelmed and unable to focus and get it done, shutting down and avoiding such demands is not effective. In both cases, crisis survival skills are needed. There are particular times when crisis survival skills are needed. They are needed when you're having intense pain that cannot be helped quickly. Use short-term crisis survival strategies to reduce pain to a manageable level so that the crisis can be managed and destructive behavior can be avoided. Once the pain's intensity is lowered, use more long-term skills such as emotion regulation skills, reality acceptance and/or mindfulness skills, and/or interpersonal effectiveness skills. You had a surgery and you're in a lot of pain. You are prescribed some pain medication, but you have a strong urge to take a lot more than prescribed or to get drunk to ease the pain. Using a crisis survival skill, you can help yourself tolerate the pain in the moment. Surviving crisis situations is part and parcel of being effective. You apply doing what works, a core mindfulness skill. At times, people are more interested in proving to others how bad the situation is than in surviving the situation. The problem is that proving how bad it is may result in short-term gains, but it usually fails in the long run. Another time to use crisis survival skills includes wanting to act in emotion mind when that would make things worse. Crisis survival skills are useful when you suddenly have an intense urge to do something that you know will make matters worse, and you want to stop yourself before you do it. You might be standing on the subway platform with your child at rush hour, and a man pushes you to get past you and get on the train ahead of you. You might want to cuss him out or push him back, but that will be a very poor example for your child and might make matters worse if the man should choose to engage with you. Using a crisis survival skill can help you block such a reaction so that you can get home without a hitch. Another time to use crisis survival skills is when emotional distress threatens to become overwhelming. At times, it is more effective to reduce feelings immediately than to express them fully. You've been sober for 6 months and you're home alone and get this craving for a drink. You have no alcohol in the house, but you start thinking about going out and buying some. Crisis survival skills can help you get through urges without acting on them. You can distract yourself by calling a friend and asking them to come over to watch a movie with you. To distract yourself until that friend gets there, you put on music, remind yourself how lucky you are compared to others you know who've not gotten so far in sobriety. Another time to use crisis survival skills is when you're feeling overwhelmed but need to meet some sort of demand. High stress can be so disorganizing that you lose your ability to solve problems and cope well with difficult situations. Falling apart emotionally under high stress can create a new crisis, which can then exacerbate the original emotional crisis or dramatically increase destructive urges. Continuing with effective and functional behavior can be critical in diverting an emerging crisis. Crisis survival skills can buy time to regulate distress so that other DBT skills can be used. There's a tropical storm and you have to evacuate. When the storm is over, you go home and find the first floor of your home under 6 inches of water. You realize you have to get the water out. You have to go through your things to see what was damaged and can't be repaired and what can be salvaged. You are hit with a wall of overwhelm. You can't think to organize what to do, so you sit down and read a magazine instead of getting to work on the house. Realizing that this is ineffective, you use one of the crisis survival skills to calm yourself down to get started. Lastly, we use crisis survival skills when you're having extreme arousal and problems that can't be solved immediately. When emotional arousal is extreme and the situation feels like a crisis, it can be very difficult to distract and put a problem on the shelf. The urgency to solve a problem right now can make it difficult to do anything that is not focused on the crisis. If the time is not right for working on a particular problem, this sense of urgency can create its own problems. Crisis survival skills can be used to distract from the situation until it can be solved. You get home from work and realize you didn't do your last task at the office, which was super important. There's nothing you can do to fix the problem until tomorrow morning. So, to get through until the next day, you play games with your daughter and read her a bedtime story. After she's in bed, you self-soothe by taking a bubble bath and turning on your favorite music. Tomorrow is another day and you will get things done. You can evaluate whether crisis survival skills are working. When time passes and you haven't done anything to make things worse, the skills are working. This is true even if you don't feel better, and it is the most important way to evaluate whether a crisis survival skill is working. Skills are working when you start feeling more able to tolerate the problem while using other skills. You can rate your distress tolerance from 1 to 100. This is the next way to evaluate whether a crisis survival skill is working. The last way to evaluate whether crisis survival skills are working is that you might feel better. Obviously, this is emotion regulation, and if so, great. But if not, keep focusing on surviving the crisis.